He tore his own wife's plane ticket in half, at the boarding gate, in front of a crowd of strangers. His mother had just slapped her across the face. And he walked away, into first class, with his mistress on his arm on their wedding anniversary. But here is what Derek Hayes did not know, what nobody at that gate knew, what nobody on that entire aircraft could have predicted. His wife owned the plane. Not the seat, not the row, not the ticket he destroyed. The plane, the airline, the entire Meridian Airways Corporation, valued at over $4 trillion, belonged to the quiet woman in the floral dress whose cheek was still burning from his mother's hand. And Seat 1A, the seat reserved on every single Meridian flight for the chairman of the board, had been waiting for her the entire time. So before this story goes 1 second further, ask yourself this. What do you do when the man you married tears up the wrong woman's ticket? What do you do when the woman he dismissed owns every inch of the aircraft he is sitting on? And what happens at 37,000 feet, with nowhere to run, nowhere to land, and nowhere to hide, when he finally realizes exactly who is sitting in Seat 1A? Stay with this, because nothing about what follows is what you expect. The alarm did not wake Claire Hayes. She had been awake since 5, lying still in the gray dark the way a person lies still when their mind has been moving since 3, turning things over, pressing on them gently, checking what still held and what had quietly come loose. When the light finally arrived, it came sharp and clinical through the blinds of apartment 4B, the kind of morning light that has no interest in being kind. Claire rose without drama. She dressed in a floral cotton dress that had cost $11 from a rack near the subway entrance. She stood at the bathroom mirror and applied the kind of makeup that takes exactly 3 minutes, not because she lacked the skill for more, but because she had spent precisely 2 years refining the discipline of being unremarkable. She was exceptional at it now. It had become something close to an art form. Her phone, an old Samsung with a cracked screen, the diagonal fracture running from upper left to lower right like a permanent fault line, buzzed on the edge of the sink. She glanced at the notification without picking it up. WHITFILD HOLDINGS Q4 revenue, $4.3 trillion. Paris board convenes, 9 a.m. tomorrow. She silenced it, turned it face down. Somewhere in Midtown Manhattan, in a corner office on the 41st floor of a building that bore no external signage, because companies worth $4 trillion do not require external signage. The lights of Whitfield Global Holdings had been on since midnight. 47 subsidiary companies across 6 continents moved in the way that large, quiet, extraordinarily powerful things move, without announcement, without urgency, without the need for anyone's permission. The corporation had generated more revenue in the last fiscal quarter than most nations produced in a year. It owned real estate on 4 continents, a controlling interest in 11 tech companies, 3 private banking institutions, and 1 airline, Meridian Airways, wholly, completely, without a single shared share. That airline was the thing Thomas Whitfield had been most proud of. Claire's father had started with a single cargo truck, a borrowed storage unit, and $400 in 1987. He had built the empire the way he built everything, slowly, intelligently, and with the specific ferocity of a man who had been told at 22 that he would never amount to anything. By the time cancer took him 3 years ago, he was worth more than the GDP of Portugal, and he had watched every dollar of it work against him, in the end. Watched board members circle like patient birds. Watched business partners reveal themselves as instruments of leverage. Watched his first wife, Claire's mother, Margaret Ann, driven to the edge of a breakdown by men who used her emotional vulnerability to extract corporate concessions from Thomas himself. He had written the clause into his will with James Cole's help, sitting in a hospital room on the 14th floor of Memorial General, oxygen tube across his lip, voice steady as iron. She lives without the money for 2 years. No title, no wealth, no public identity, just Claire, whoever Claire is without all of this. If she finds something real in those 2 years, the empire is hers, clean and complete. If she's been played, James has the instruments to protect everything. Everything. Claire had honored every word of it. She moved into this apartment. She got this phone. She took a job teaching 5th grade at Jefferson Elementary and ate lunch from the school cafeteria and carried a canvas tote bag and let the world see absolutely nothing. It had cost her something, she knew that precisely. There were mornings she stood at this mirror and felt the gap between what she was performing and what she actually was, and the gap was the width of $4 trillion, and it pressed against her chest like a held breath. She opened the small wooden jewelry box on the bathroom shelf, flea market find, chipped at the upper corner, visibly filled with inexpensive rings. Beneath those rings, flat against the floor of the box, was a single card, heavy cream stock, embossed letters pressed with the quiet authority of something that required no decoration. ELEANORCWHITFILD, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer, WHITFILD Global HOLDINGS. She traced it once, her real name, the title her father built with 40 years of his life. She closed the box. Today, at precisely 8 a.m., the 2-year clause had expired. She had booked them on Meridian Airlines Flight 7 to Paris, first class, filed under a leaner Whitfield, because Seat 1A existed on every Meridian aircraft as standing protocol held for the chairman whether announced or not. She had planned to tell Derek everything at Le Cinq. Champagne, the card face up on the white linen, his face which she had imagined faithfully, repeatedly, hopefully, as wonder. She picked up her carry-on. She walked into the bedroom where Derek stood with his back to her, voice pressed low into his phone, using the particular register men use when they are hiding something in plain air. "Just get to Terminal B, Vicky, Gate 22. I handled everything." He killed the call the instant he heard her footsteps, turned, looked at her dress. In the half-second before he arranged his expression, something moved across his face, small and contemptuous and entirely unguarded. Claire had seen it before. 14 months ago, she had chosen to call it stress. She was done calling it that. "Ready?" she said. "Yeah," he said, "let's go." The departures terminal of Kennedy International moved the way large public spaces always move in the morning, with the particular restless energy of people going somewhere and the quiet dread of people being left behind. Families, business travelers, couples mid-argument, pretending not to be. The overhead displays flickered with gate changes and boarding calls in the flat, indifferent language of airports everywhere. Claire walked 3 steps behind Derek through the sliding doors, carry-on in one hand, cracked phone in her jacket pocket, and the other phone, the slim black one, in the interior pocket closest to her chest. She had carried that phone for 6 weeks, ever since James had called her on a Wednesday evening and said quietly that he needed her to have a secure line. She had asked no questions. She trusted James Cole the way she trusted very few people completely, and with good reason. James Cole was 54 years old and looked 45. He had been Thomas Whitfield's attorney for 26 years, general counsel of Whitfield Holdings for 19, and the single most tactically intelligent person Claire had ever known. He dressed in charcoal suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and carried himself with the particular stillness of a man who had never, in his adult life, been surprised by anything. He had watched Derek Hayes from the moment Claire mentioned his name 14 months ago at the end of a brief quarterly call. He had said nothing then. He had simply begun watching. That was the thing about James, he never spoke before he had everything. And when he had everything, he didn't need to speak loudly. He was already in the terminal when they arrived. Claire spotted him without looking at him. A discipline acquired over 2 years of practiced invisibility extended naturally to noticing the people watching over you. He sat near the Meridian check-in desk with an espresso and a newspaper he was not reading, in a charcoal suit without a single wrinkle, looking for all the world like a patient business traveler. His eyes moved once to Derek, once to the doors, then to his phone, where he typed a single line and sent it. Claire's Samsung buzzed in her pocket. She did not check it. She would not need to. Standing at the terminal curb, surrounded by matched designer luggage in cream and tan, 4 pieces, more than any one person needed for a weekend, was Margaret Hayes, 58 years old, Derek's mother, a woman who had grown up with moderate wealth, married into slightly more, and spent the intervening decades constructing an identity entirely dependent on the performance of superiority over others. She wore a fur collar in 62-degree weather. She had never in 2 years accepted Claire, not at the wedding which she attended in ivory, a studied insult she denied with practiced innocence, not at Christmas, where she distributed gifts to everyone at the table and produced nothing for Claire, then looked surprised to be noticed doing it. Not once across 14 months of Sunday dinners and family events and quiet, sustained, architectural cruelty, designed to erode a woman's sense of belonging one small cut at a time. Derek had never once told her to stop. That silence, Claire had come to understand, was not weakness, it was agreement. Margaret conducted a slow, surgical inspection of Claire's floral dress from collar to hem. The inspection carried the specific pleasure of a woman who has waited all morning for this precise opportunity. Still dressing from the donations bin, I see. She kissed her son's cheek and walked ahead without waiting for a response, wheeling her largest suitcase with the authority of a woman who had decided she was the main character of this particular morning. Claire said nothing. She had learned over 14 months that silence was the only response Margaret could not weaponize. They cleared check-in, moved toward gate 22, and in the security queue, in the particular way of someone who has planned an entrance rather than simply arrived, Victoria Lane materialized at Derek's left side. 30 years old, red dress fitted, perfume that preceded her by 6 feet, the kind of woman who understood precisely the mechanics of being seen, who to face, where to stand, when to let a hand fall near a man's arm in a way that could be claimed as accidental. She had been Derek's mistress for 8 months and 11 days. She did not know that James Cole had documented every one of those days with the thoroughness of a forensic accountant. She was also, though she did not know this either, currently wearing a bracelet purchased on October 14th from a boutique on Madison Avenue, charged to a joint account funded entirely by Claire's trust disbursements. James had the receipt. He had the receipt for everything. For just one electric second, standing in the security line, Victoria's fingers brushed Derek's. Claire saw it. The contact was brief, designed to be brief, but Claire had been watching for it since the lobby. "This is Victoria," Derek said, his voice carrying the particular practiced lightness of a man delivering a lie he has rehearsed. "Business associate, conference in Paris. She's on the same flight." "On our anniversary trip," Claire said. Her voice was perfectly even. "Don't make it a thing." "Don't start," he said, quietly. The 2 words landing with the specific weight of something that had been used before, a door that had been shut in her face so many times the hinges no longer squeaked. Margaret drifted close to Claire's right ear. The fur collar brushed Claire's shoulder. "You know, dear, there's no shame in economy. Some women simply aren't built for certain spaces. It's nothing to be embarrassed about, it's just nature." Victoria's laugh was soft and deliberate, the kind that has nothing to do with humor and everything to do with establishing a hierarchy. Near the Meridian check-in desk, James Cole turned a page of his unread newspaper. At gate 22, the boarding agent Sophie, 11 years with Meridian, reliable and unflappable, pulled up the passenger manifest on her screen. Her eyes moved to the top of the first-class list. To the name beside seat 1A, her posture shifted by exactly 1 degree, a small internal adjustment, invisible to anyone who was not looking for it. She had been briefed. She knew the protocol. She straightened her collar and said nothing. The boarding queue at gate 22 moved in the slow, shuffling rhythm of a crowd that has been waiting long enough to abandon whatever good mood it arrived with. The overhead screens announced final boarding for Meridian Flight 7. Families repositioned luggage. A toddler cried briefly and stopped. Near the back of the economy queue, a teenage girl stood alone, phone raised, filming the general activity of the terminal with the casual, unself-conscious documentation of someone who films everything as a matter of habit. Her name was unimportant at that moment. It would become very important shortly. Claire stood in the economy boarding line. Derek had taken both their passes at check-in and suggested she queue separately while he handled the bags, which was the kind of sentence that had once sounded like helpfulness and now sounded like exactly what it was. She held her carry-on with both hands and watched Margaret settle herself into the first-class queue 20 feet away with the proprietary ease of a woman who had decided the world was arranged for her convenience. She watched Derek take Victoria's boarding pass from his jacket pocket and hand it to her, a smooth, practiced gesture, the kind that comes from rehearsal. She had suspected Victoria for 6 weeks. She had known for 4. There is a particular quality to the knowing. The moment a suspicion calcifies into certainty, that cannot be adequately described in terms of emotion because it is not precisely emotional. It is structural. The scaffolding you built your ordinary life upon is revealed to be hollow, and you do not feel the floor give way so much as you simply see, with new eyes, that you were never standing on solid ground. Claire had gone very quiet when she knew, internally, the way a building goes quiet before a controlled demolition. Derek crossed to her now, moving out of the first-class queue with the purposeful stride of a man approaching a problem he intends to resolve quickly. He looked at Claire's face with the expression, she had catalogued it carefully, that preceded his most damaging moments. The expression that said he had already decided the outcome of a conversation before opening it. I need you to take economy today. Victoria's in first class, Mom's in first class, it'll just be easier. I have a first-class ticket, Derek. I'll upgrade you on the way back. It's one flight. On our anniversary. His jaw tightened. Don't. Don't what? She said. Don't mention that it's our anniversary. Don't notice that your mistress is standing 20 feet away with a boarding pass you just handed her. Which one would you prefer I not do? His eyes went flat. That was the tell, not anger, but the specific flatness that preceded a power move. She had seen it 5 times in 14 months, and each time the move had been designed to make her feel small, unstable, or invisible. This time, she saw it coming like weather. Margaret materialized at Derek's shoulder with the timing of a woman who had been listening. And her hand moved. The slap landed on Claire's left cheek with a sound that was too clean and too loud for the surrounding noise, and for one suspended second the terminal rearranged itself. The toddler's mother looked up sharply. The businessman in the queue ahead turned. The teenage girl's phone tilted 45 degrees toward them. The contact was open-palmed, full-handed, and hard enough to rock Claire's head sideways. The silence that followed was the particular silence of a crowd that has just witnessed something cross a line. Margaret smoothed her fur collar. "You will speak to my son with respect," she said, "or you won't speak to him at all." Claire's hand rose slowly to her left cheek. She did not cry. She did not collapse. She did not produce the devastated, small reaction Margaret had been engineering toward for 14 months. She stood entirely still and looked at Margaret with an expression of such complete, undisturbed calm that it was, somehow, the most frightening thing she could have done. Derek looked at his mother, looked at Claire, and in the half-second when something decent might have surfaced in him, the memory of soup on a Tuesday, or a death anniversary remembered, or the 2 words he'd said twice about what mattered, it did not. Something else surfaced instead. Something that had been waiting for exactly this geometry of witnesses and momentum. He reached over, took Claire's first-class boarding pass directly from her hand. He folded it once, deliberately, then he tore it clean and controlled, then tore it again. The pieces fell from his fingers to the terminal floor in slow, separate beats, like the last notes of something irreversible. Economy's the other cue. His voice was quiet and absolute. Don't embarrass me in front of my family today. He took Victoria's arm and walked into the first-class boarding lane without looking back. Margaret followed, smoothing her collar, her posture carrying the particular satisfaction of a woman who has just won something. The older woman 2 places back in the queue reached toward Claire's arm. "Honey, are you?" "I'm fine," Claire said. Her voice was still water over stone. She looked down at the torn pieces on the floor, bent down slowly, picked up both halves, held them together in her palm and looked at them with an expression that was not grief and not rage and not humiliation, though all 3 would have been justified. She almost smiled. A small, private, devastating almost smile. The expression of a person who has just watched an opponent play the only card they had left, not knowing they are in the wrong game entirely. She reached inside her jacket, not the Samsung. The other phone, slim, black, the one James had given her 6 weeks ago. She dialed without looking. 1 ring. "James." "I saw," he said, "all of it. Activate the Seat 1A protocol. I'm boarding." A pause, a single breath, and then, in the voice of a man who had been waiting for this instruction for 6 weeks, with the patience of someone who had prepared everything and needed only permission. "With pleasure, Ms. Whitfield." She folded the torn boarding pass, both halves together, and put them in her jacket pocket. She walked toward the boarding gate. Sophie looked up from her screen, looked at Claire, said nothing. Scanned her through. The first-class cabin of Meridian Airlines Flight 7 was everything the rest of the aircraft was not. Wide leather seats in cream and charcoal, separated by individual privacy panels of polished walnut. Ambient lighting, warm gold, carefully diffused, that made every passenger look like someone who belonged in the kind of room where important decisions were made. Crystal glassware, temperature-regulated storage. The particular, hushed quality of a space designed to make its occupants feel that the ordinary world, with its noise and friction and consequences, had been temporarily suspended on their behalf. Derek settled into Seat 2A with the ease of a man who had decided the morning had gone his way. He had managed Claire. He had managed the scene. He had the girl he wanted in the seat beside him, and the mother who always took his side across the aisle. He raised his hand for champagne before the cabin door was fully sealed, which was the kind of gesture made by men who have never once considered that a gesture could be premature. Victoria settled into 2B. She crossed her legs and took a photograph of the cabin interior, the leather, the lighting, the crystal, and posted it before the doors were locked. The caption read, "Finally, this is the life." She had 2,300 followers who would see it within the hour. Margaret took 2C and pressed her palm against the armrest leather, with the deliberate sensory satisfaction of a woman rewarding herself for a morning well executed. She had slapped a woman in an airport. She had watched her son tear up that woman's ticket. She had walked into first class afterward without a tremor of conscience. This was the full moral architecture of Margaret Hayes, the complete structure of a woman who had spent 60 years of life confusing cruelty with authority and mistaking the silence of those she hurt for their consent. At the front of the cabin, behind the privacy curtain that separated first class from the boarding door, senior flight attendant Dana Reeves reviewed the seating manifest on her tablet with the focused attention she brought to every departure. Dana had been with Meridian for 12 years. She had worked this cabin through turbulence and medical emergencies, and once, on a transatlantic flight, had quietly managed a full diplomatic incident without anyone in economy class knowing it had occurred. She was, in the specific language of her profession, unflappable. She reached the first row of the manifest. Her eyes moved to the entry beside Seat 1A. She read it twice. Then she set the tablet down and moved to the forward galley, where she stood in the quiet, upright posture of someone who has received information and is now simply waiting for events to arrange themselves accordingly. Dana had seen the Seat 1A placard activated 3 times in 12 years. She knew what it meant. She knew exactly who it meant. The boarding door was nearly closed. The privacy curtain at the front of the cabin moved. And Claire walked through. The same floral dress, the same modest shoes, the Samsung visible in her jacket pocket. Her left cheek still carried, to those looking closely, the faint red signature of Margaret's palm. She looked to every eye in first class like someone who had taken a wrong turn after economy boarding. A mix-up, an embarrassment, someone who would be gently redirected in a moment. Every eye in the cabin turned to look at her. Derek's champagne glass stopped halfway to his mouth. Dana moved forward immediately, not with the corrective body language of someone about to redirect a mistake, but with the warm, practiced ease of someone greeting an expected and honored presence. "Ms. Whitfield," Dana's voice was professionally even and completely genuine. "Welcome aboard. Your usual sparkling water or something different today?" The name moved through the first-class cabin the way a current moves through still water, invisibly and completely, touching everything at once. Derek set his glass down. Claire moved to Seat 1A without hurrying. She settled into it with the quiet, total authority of someone sitting at the head of their own table, because she was. She accepted the sparkling water from Dana, opened the leather-bound itinerary folder, prepared for this seat on every Meridian flight, without exception, and reviewed it with the focused attention of a woman with a board meeting in 14 hours. Derek leaned forward. His voice was low and careful, deploying the reasonable tone, the one he used when he wanted to sound like the adult in a situation he had created. "Claire, that seat is reserved. You know that. You need to." "I know," she said without looking up. "That's the chairman's seat. You can't sit there. Someone is going to." "I know," she said again. She turned a page. "Claire," his voice sharpened at the edges. She looked at him then, directly. Her eyes were calm, not cold, not blazing, but calm with the specific quality of a calm that has been earned through the deliberate decision not to burn something down when burning it down was available as an option. "It's always reserved for me, Derek, on every Meridian flight, on every route, on every aircraft in this fleet." He stared. Something moved behind his eyes, the first iteration of arithmetic he did not want to complete. "What does that?" The captain's voice filled the cabin. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome aboard Meridian Airlines Flight 7, non-stop service to Paris Charles de Gaulle. On behalf of our chairman and chief executive officer, Ms. Claire Whitfield, and our entire crew here at Meridian Airways, wholly owned by Whitfield Global Holdings, we thank you for choosing to fly with us today. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight." The captain continued. Nobody in first class heard the rest. The blood left Derek's face in one clean, complete motion, the way color leaves a room when the last light goes out. Margaret's almond stopped mid-chew. Victoria's champagne flute descended to the tray table in the slow, disbelieving way of an object set down by hands that have lost their coordination. The teenager from Gate 22, the girl who had raised her phone in the terminal 40 minutes ago, was seated 3 rows back in first class, earbuds in, phone angled toward the front row with the casual naturalness of someone who had been placed exactly where she needed to be. She gave Claire a small, businesslike wave when Claire's eyes moved briefly in her direction. Derek followed Claire's gaze, saw the phone, saw the angle, understood in a crashing, instantaneous way that the video of his mother's slap and his torn ticket was not sitting on a teenager's camera roll. It was already somewhere else. He turned back to Claire. You set this up, this hole." "I set nothing up," Claire said, her voice as even as a horizon. I simply stopped hiding. A figure appeared from the direction of business class, moving at a measured, unhurried pace, carrying a slim black tablet, wearing charcoal without a wrinkle. James Cole took his position behind seat 1A, not beside it, behind it, precisely and permanently. Like a wall that had always been there, and had simply chosen this moment to make itself visible. Ms. Whitfield. He set the tablet on the armrest. The Paris legal team confirms arrival at Charles de Gaulle. Denning's shares were consolidated at 6 this morning at a 14% discount. His offshore accounts were frozen last Tuesday. The emergency shareholder vote requires 30% board approval to initiate. We currently hold 61% of the voting bloc. He glanced briefly at the second row. The vote cannot be called without our consent. The tablet screen showed a single document. Claire looked at it, signed it with 2 strokes of a stylus. James picked it up, looked once levelly without expression at Derek, then returned to business class. Derek sat in seat 2A of an aircraft owned by his wife, in a cabin where every staff member knew her name and none of them knew his, and held what remained of his champagne glass with both hands. Margaret had stopped moving entirely. Victoria, in the row behind, was on her phone, thumbs moving fast, the screen visible for just a fraction of a second before the angle shifted, long enough for the audience to almost read a name before the view cut away. Almost. The plane climbed through 10,000 feet, and the first-class cabin held itself in the specific tense stillness of people who have witnessed something irreversible and have not yet determined what to do with the knowledge. Outside the oval windows, New York fell away beneath cloud cover, the geometry of bridges and boroughs dissolving into gray, and then into nothing, and then into the particular blue blankness of cruising altitude where the ordinary world loses its edges, and everything that exists is only what is in the room with you. Derek had not touched his champagne in 20 minutes. He leaned forward, and when he spoke, his voice had shifted entirely. Gone was the reasonable tone, the careful control. In its place was something smooth and calibrated in a different register. The voice of a man who has decided that the defensive game is lost and it is time to play an entirely different hand. I had a conversation with Arthur Denning 8 weeks ago, he said, over golf at Meadowbrook. Claire's eyes moved from the itinerary folder to his face. He reached inside his jacket and removed a folded document. He opened it slowly, with the deliberate packing of someone who has been waiting for this moment. Did you know Arthur has been acquiring secondary shares in 4 Whitfield subsidiaries through a shell company registered in the Caymans, quietly, for 18 months? James reappeared from business class before Claire could speak. He had been listening. He was always listening. Mr. Hayes. James's voice was the temperature of a room without heating. Denning's Cayman accounts were frozen on Tuesday morning by our offshore legal division. The shares were acquired by Whitfield Holdings at 6 a.m. yesterday at a 14% discount, as I mentioned. The shell company was dissolved at 8:17 a.m. today, which was a fractional pause, 17 minutes after the clause in Mr. Thomas Whitfield's will formally expired. Derek's jaw moved. He looked at the document in his hand. So you knew about Denning, he said. For 2 months, Claire said. James confirmed it 6 weeks ago. Then why, he stopped, recalculated. Why didn't you just leave, she said. The word arrived in the cabin the way certain words arrive fully, finally, without requiring anything around them. I wanted to know who placed you near me, Derek. It wasn't enough to know what you were doing. I needed to know who sent you. The cabin went absolutely quiet. Derek's expression, for the first time in the entire morning, for the first time perhaps in the entire 14 months, showed something that had not been calculated. A fracture, small and real and involuntary. Nobody sent me, he said. Arthur Denning introduced you to his nephew Ryan at Meadowbrook in February of last year. James said, consulting nothing. Ryan introduced you to a consultant named Mercer, who introduced you to an opportunity, a social introduction, framed casually, at a neighborhood fundraiser in March. The fundraiser was not random. The neighborhood was not random. The soup on a Tuesday was not random. The word random moved through the cabin like a scalpel. Claire looked at her husband, the man who had brought her soup, who had remembered her father's anniversary, who had said twice that money didn't matter. Was any of it real? She asked. Her voice was not accusatory. It was the voice of a woman asking a question she already knows the answer to, asking it anyway because some things deserve to be said aloud. Derek was quiet for a long time. The engine noise filled the silence. The clouds outside the oval windows were white and indifferent, and 37,000 feet below them, the world continued without interruption. The first month, he said, maybe. It was the most honest thing he had said in 14 months. It was also the most devastating, because maybe is not yes, and the maybe he offered her now arrived too late to be anything except another wound with a different shape. The divorce papers were filed in Maryland District Court at 8:17 this morning, James said. Under the Whitfield Holdings Asset Protection Trust, Article 7, all wealth accumulated before and during the marriage is ring-fenced. The marital estate subject to division is limited to jointly acquired assets only. Derek looked at James, which totals one joint checking account, current balance $412, and a Honda Civic registered in your name. James adjusted his cuff. The bracelet Ms. Lane is currently wearing was purchased October 14th, charged to the joint account, funded by Ms. Whitfield's trust disbursements. We will be recovering the value. From business class, the sound of a bracelet being quietly removed. Margaret spoke from across the aisle. Her voice had lost, somewhere over the Atlantic, all of its architecture. You cannot do this to my son. You entrapped him. You deceived him into this marriage. Mrs. Hayes. Claire turned to face her, and the steadiness in her voice was the steadiness of $4 trillion and a father's love and 2 years of deliberate patience reaching their conclusion simultaneously. Your hand was on my face at gate 2241 minutes ago, in public, on video, on a phone that has been streaming to a private server since the moment it was raised. She glanced briefly toward the teenager 3 rows back. The footage is time-stamped, geolocated, and currently in the possession of my legal team in New York, my legal team in Paris, and 3 journalists who cover corporate affairs for publications your friends read at breakfast. Margaret's mouth opened. The building your Tuesday salon operates from, Claire continued, is owned by Whitfield Real Estate Holdings, subsidiary 7. The lease renewal crossed my desk last month. I haven't signed it. A pause of exactly the right length. I'll think about it. The plane began its descent. The cabin lights shifted. The Paris skyline was not yet visible, but the quality of the light through the windows changed, warmer, older, the specific gold of a European afternoon, 40 minutes from landing. In business class, Victoria's phone screen glowed. Her thumbs moved fast, urgently, the rhythm of someone not texting but warning. The camera angle held on the screen for 3 deliberate seconds, a name visible at the top of the message thread. Not Denning, not Derek, a name nobody in this cabin had said yet. The name of someone higher. The plane dropped through cloud cover. Paris came up through the windows, gray and gold and indifferent. The way Paris always is, beautiful and unconcerned with the human drama descending into it. The wheels met the runway with a clean, definitive thud. At the jet bridge, 3 figures in dark suits waited with tablets. Beside them, 2 members of Claire's personal security, and behind them, entirely unexpectedly, in a cream coat, silver-haired, her hands clasped at her waist, a woman. Claire went still in the aisle. Her mother had been in London. Her mother had been in London for 2 years. because the clause required complete separation from everyone who knew her real identity, and her mother had honored it faithfully, painfully, for 730 days. Her mother was here, and she was crying, not with relief, not with joy, with urgency, the specific tears of a woman who has been holding something for weeks and could not say it over a line she didn't trust. Claire moved up the jet bridge. "Mom!" Her mother's hands came out and took her face, both sides, gently, thumbs against her cheekbones, and looked at her with an expression of love so fierce, and so freighted it functioned as a warning. "Baby," she said, "there's something you don't know yet about the board, about your father's will." She pulled her close. "James doesn't know either." Above them, still on the aircraft, Victoria Lane deleted the message thread, wiped the screen, and sat perfectly still, staring straight ahead, with the expression of a woman waiting for instructions that had not yet arrived.